our contrast ratio jumped from that 39,000 and some change to just under 60,000 to 1.
Wow, so that kind of almost doubled.
JVC has done some magic with their new 800 series and 900 series projectors. We started with, we set 106 nits on the natural profile. Our calibrated profile, as you can see, landed at 103 nits. So we only lost 3 nits of brightness, which is really an imperceptible difference. You're not going to notice it. Even if they were side by side, you're not going to see that change.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Today in this video, we're going to be calibrating my JVC NZ800. A friend of mine, Daniel, is on his way over right now. So before he gets here, I want to get the madVR Envy Extreme Mark II installed in my setup because it's going to offer a lot more flexibility during the calibration process. And I believe we can even do some kind of turn on, turn off, and do some comparison between the before calibration and the after calibration. All right, so let's go ahead and get the Envy Extreme Mark II unboxed. This is just such well done packaging, man. I love the styling and the design of this. I mean, their marketing team definitely has got it going on. So we're just gonna need this. We don't need the rack gears. We do need the remote though. So already I'm liking the new backlit remote. We've got some new buttons on there. That looks really slick. We'll lay that off to the side. Got a cool madVR Envy sign here. Nice, look at that. This theater features madVR Labs video processing. All right, so we'll get this placed up here. So man, again, I just love the presentation of this. They've done such a great job. Got this nice little stretch fabric over the top. And of course, this is always satisfying, removing all the plastic. And we got one more right on the front. Man, that looks beautiful. I love the new design. Got this brushed aluminum on the front. All right, so as far as connections, this is a pretty straightforward system. The madVR Envy Extreme sits in between the processor, which is my Anthem Avium 70, and my projector. So we're gonna come out of the Anthem Avium 70 with a HDMI cable into this input, and then we're going to go out of this output to the projector. Now, this pass-through, I'm going to use a separate HDMI cable going straight from this pass-through to my projector, and that's going to go on input 2 of the projector. So that pass-through will be used for my PS5 since the madVR introduces too much lag for gaming. Now they are working on some improvements down the road to enhance that and reduce that time, but for now I'm just going to bypass the internal processing of the Extreme and we'll go straight to my projector and use input 2 for that. And then we'll connect my Ethernet cable right here and we'll be good to go. All right, so we're gonna need some access behind my cabinet. So we'll lift up the screen here. It's just supported on gas struts. And what we can do is turn on the light underneath. And that'll give me some access behind all the equipment. Now we've got plenty of room to put the Extreme down here. Go ahead and plug up the antenna to the USB. Slide that in there. Connect our Ethernet cable. All right, guys, I'm gonna slide in here. This is always fun, and I'm getting too old for this. But it's gotta be limber and not pull cables. All right, I thought this would make it a little bit easier to understand if I just drew a diagram, because I know when I originally hooked up the original madVR Mark I, it was a little bit confusing for me. So here you can see I've got 3 main components. Over on the far left, I've got the Anthem Avium 70. So that's the front as well as the rear. In the middle is the madVR Extreme Mark II. We've got the front as well as the rear. And then over at the far right, my JVC NZ800 projector, the front and the rear. So if we zoom in at the far left, the first connection we need to make is an HDMI cable that comes out of the HDMI out on the processor, so on the AVM70, and we're going to go all the way over to the madVR and connect that to the input. Then we're going to take a second HDMI cable and we're going to go from the output on the madVR Extreme Mark II, and we're going to take that and plug it into the HDMI 1 input on the JVC NZ800 projector. So your video processor, in this case it's the madVR Extreme Mark II, it sits in between your AVR or processor and your projector or your TV. So basically anything that comes out of the processor, so that would be Apple TV, 4K player, that could be pretty much anything that you connect to your AVR or processor, that's going to be processed with the madVR. Now, if you're going to connect a gaming system, in my case, I have a PlayStation 5 that is connected to the Anthem AVM70, we don't want that to be processed by the madVR because it introduces too much lag. It adds too much latency. And we're going to connect another HDMI cable. It'll come from the bypass output on the madVR, and then we'll connect that to the second input on the projector. So when I'm watching my Apple TV 4K or my 4K player or my Kaleidoscope, we're going to be using HDMI 1 on the projector because the madVR will be in use. But when I'm gaming, I'm going to switch my projector over to HDMI 2, which is using that bypass. So we should be all connected. I think Daniel's here, so let's get it set up. All right, guys, I've got Daniel Fitterer with Reference AV. Daniel, thanks so much for stopping by, man.
Absolutely.
We're going to have some fun today, guys. So I've got my JVC NZ800. We've got the madVR Extreme Mark II. And so we're going to go through a process, and this won't be necessarily a step-by-step tutorial. It takes way too long. But I wanted to have a conversation with Daniel and put this on film for you guys, talking about the importance of calibration. Why would we want to calibrate a projector? What are some of the steps in that? And, you know, of course, we want to share with you as much as we can through this process. So, Daniel, kind of tell us who you are, what you're about. I know you travel all over the U.S.
That's right.
Doing what we're doing today. And so kind of share with my audience what you've got going on.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Michael. So I'm Daniel Fitterer. I'm the owner and calibrator for Reference AV. As Michael mentioned, I do travel the country doing professional audiovisual calibrations for customers. And really the ultimate goal of my company is to get the most out of the equipment that you've already put tons of investment into, whether that be monetary or, you know, the time that you take to install and create a room. And that extra, you know, that last little bit that you're not getting without a proper calibration. So calibration at its most simple form is when movies are made and mastered, they're using certain criteria and standards to master those movies.
Okay.
So what we're doing is we're going to be calibrating your setup in your room with your variables, your light, your bounce back, your screen, your projector, to those same standards.
Okay.
So the goal will be a more lifelike, more representative image to what the director intended for you to see.
Well, I'm excited, guys. So I tell you what, we're going to get out your equipment. I know he's brought a bunch of stuff. So this isn't just your stuff you're going to pick up at Walmart. I mean, this
Correct.
is high caliber, really high-end calibration software, colorimeter. I've heard that term thrown
And a
around.
spectro as well.
And a spectro. So we're going to see what a spectro is.
We can talk about those differences here shortly.
So I think throughout this process, we're just going to bring you along for the ride. Like I said, it's not going to be a step-by-step tutorial, but I want you to see what components are involved in something like this. And then I'd love to have a conversation even during it on maybe some things that you can help me to understand. Why would we do this, or what are we doing here? And then at the end, I'd love to sit down and have a conversation like, what was our results?
Perfect.
All right, let's jump into it.
Sounds good. So what we're doing here is these are basically the settings out of the box for the JVC and the natural, which is going to be the more natural preset that you can go to without a calibration.
Okay.
The one change that we have done so far is to increase the laser dimming. The default is 46.
Okay.
We're wanting to get the maximum dynamic range possible, so we're going to bump that up to 100.
All right.
I also turned off the dynamic laser or the laser dimming. For calibration, we don't use that.
Okay.
When we're done, you can turn it back on, and that doesn't impact the calibration one way or another.
All right.
It's kind of a salt to taste type of thing. You can use different modes based on your personal like.
Okay.
So that's the changes that we've made inside the JVC. We're going to do some pre-measurements to understand how far out from the industry standard we are.
Sure.
In fact, one more change we'll make is we're going to swap this over to Gamma 2.4.
All right.
Gamma 2.4 is what you would want to use in a light-controlled room where you have complete blackout.
Sure. Which that's what we have here in my
Yep.
room.
So we're ready to go. We'll go ahead and get the remainder set up and start taking some measurements of the JVC out of the gates.
All right, Daniel, we've got some equipment hooked up here. You're on a laptop. Tell us what we're about to do.
So right now, the very first step that we're going to do is we've got 2 meters here. The easy layman's way of describing these is one is highly, highly accurate, but it's slow as molasses. And the other one is a speed demon and reads very, very low black levels.
Okay.
But it's not as accurate. So what we're doing is we're creating a meter profile. So we're going to profile the very accurate one against the not so accurate one. There'll be the same accuracy after that, but you get all the benefit of the speed increase. So we're not here for a couple days doing a calibration. It's only going to take us, an hour or two to get it done instead. So,
Well, that'd be a good time to go get lunch.
you were right. So what we're doing here is we just did the initial characterization of the JVC by itself in its natural mode, which is out of the box. We did make changes for the laser up to 100 and to the gamma to the 2.4, which is the mode that we're targeting for our calibration. So what we're doing here, because we're using the Envy Extreme MK2, we're going to go into a mode in the JVC where it's bypassing all factory calibrations.
Okay.
Because the madVR is going to be our vehicle to be able to provide those calibrations in a more accurate fashion.
Right. Okay.
So to do that, what we're doing is we're going into the, we did a custom user profile, so that's why it's user 1 here.
All right.
And just sharing some of the settings.
Okay.
Laser dimming's at 100. Again, dynamic control or laser dimming we have off for the calibration. You
Right.
can salt to taste and turn on post-calibration with no issues.
Okay.
Then we go into the high brightness mode and the profile off. And this is what's bypassing the actual internal tables.
Sure.
So when we do that out of the gates, it's a very green image.
Okay.
And I've already done this while you were out of the room, but we have changed the white balance. So we're hitting our D65 white point.
Okay.
And we've got a pure white on the screen, no blue, no red hue to it or tint. So these are the adjustment settings that got us to that point.
Okay.
And we, at this point, are going to start doing the 1D LUT and talking a little bit about LUTs.
Okay.
LUT stands for LUT, look up table.
Right.
Basically what it's doing is it's creating, think of it like an Excel document.
Okay.
On one column, you've got the expected value that is supposed to be seen.
Right.
On the next column, you've got the returned value, which is what the meters are actually seen from your screen.
Right.
Then there's an algorithm that's taking place, which is the LUT, which converts what it's supposed to be and what's seen to be much closer together. So it's a mathematical algorithm that's taking place, and we do that for 1D, which is your grayscale and gamma, as well as 3D, which is your colors throughout the entire spectrum.
Sure.
So when we reference a 1D LUT and a 3D LUT, that's what it's talking about.
Okay.
And there's different ways that you can do that, but that's what each of those means, and we'll use a combination of those to get our final calibration.
All right, guys, we have just finished calibrating the NZ800. And I'll be honest, Daniel, it looks gorgeous, man. So I'm not going to pretend like I understand a lot of this. And so I'm hoping that this will be educational for both you and me. We're going to walk through some of the results that you got with your software, And Daniel's even going to kind of walk us through on things like color space. Maybe you're not familiar with the difference between Rec 2020?
2020.
BT 2020?
Yep.
So I'm learning. Rec 709 and things like that. So I just think that this will just be a great conversation. So Daniel, kind of walk us through, like, what are we looking at here on the computer?
So first here we've got a graphic that's a great way to kind of look at the different color spaces, and really within this you're able to understand what is HDR and what is SDR. So this entire diagram of color here on the outsides is the visible color space that our human eyes can see.
Right.
In the red triangle you've got the Rec 2020 color space, which is how movies are coming into our players and into our projectors and into our TVs,
Okay.
but we're not necessarily achieving very many colors that are actually deep into this color space. So DCI P3, which is this yellowish
That's the one in the
orange,
middle.
yep,
Okay.
that is the vast majority, I'd say greater than 95, probably greater than 97% of 4K ultra high definition HDR content is within that triangle
Okay.
or less. There is movies, and there's actually a good list of them on AVS forums where they've done recordings and actually looking at the material and where it's going beyond the DCI P3. The Matrix was one of them. I believe Mad Max Fury Road was one in the red with the sand.
Okay.
So if you wanted to see that content,
Sure.
it's available there. And then you have Rec 709, which is our SDR standard, and all these fall within that BT 2020 envelope. So that makes it, for calibration, something that we can achieve if we're reaching for a larger gamut like the DCI P3. One of the beauties and the powers of a video processor is that we can clamp that down and obtain a perfect Rec 709
Okay.
calibration, even though we're using a native gamut of the projector, which is much wider.
Sure.
So we have done that in one of the LUTs that we have done for your setup on the NZ800 with the madVR Envy Mark II Extreme.
Okay.
And here we'll go into the details. So first here we've got, this is the original characterization of the display that we did in the natural mode where we showed you earlier, where we changed the laser power to 100
Right.
and we changed the gamut to 2.4, which was our target for the calibration today. So a couple things that are apparent you can see here. There's a lot of red inside of this triangle.
Red's bad.
Red's, in this case, red is bad, even though it's my favorite color. Red is not ideal. So there's what these colors mean within the software is it delineates different delta E, or the change in expected color from the reference to what was actually recorded by our meters. So green is ideal. Green is under, I believe, a 0.8 delta E. So inside of this diagram, you can see different colors of dots. And here's the original graph that we were looking at with the profile, or the JVC out of the box in its natural mode. Laser dimming is set to 100, and we've changed the gamma to the 2.4, which is the target for our calibration for today. You're going to see a couple of green dots, a little bit more orange dots, and a lot of red. So what that delineates to us is the amount of error from the expected value that the software is looking for versus what the meters are actually receiving. So a green dot is going to be anything less than 1. An orange dot is going to be anything between 1 and 2.3 delta E, and a red dot is going to be 2.3 and beyond.
Okay.
What that means to us, so under a 3 delta E, or a 3 or below, you're going to see error. If you were to see the two colors side by side,
Your brain can notice that something's not right there.
very quickly you're going to notice that color variation. Under a 2, it's still noticeable, but it's much harder to discern. So you got to take a little bit closer look at it.
Okay.
If you're watching content in a movie, it's probably not going to be super visible. Under 1 is imperceptible.
Okay.
So you're not going to notice any error whatsoever. So the goal is to have as good as possible.
Sure.
But we will have some error still, especially in the case of not using the color filter.
Okay.
And I can explain why here shortly. So in the factory mode out of the box, our calibration had an average delta E across this 1000 read measurement of 4.3.
Okay. That's not good. That was higher than 3.
That's higher than 3.
Learning,
so
guys.
You're going to definitely notice an error in the picture.
Okay.
And you can see when we swap back and forth between the modes, it's pretty apparent.
We've got to show you this a little bit later because I want you to see visually. It was drastic. And I didn't realize how drastic it was because I didn't have anything to compare it to.
100%.
And now it makes sense.
That's a very accurate statement. Kind of what you would expect to see on an average box out of the device getting placed into a home. I've seen as low as 3.5 to 3.7 depending on the manufacturer. Out of the box, Sony has a little bit more accurate color.
Okay.
This, I would say, is a traditional sampler for JVC. When I say accurate, it's still around a 3.5 delta
Still
E.
great, but you've seen some better.
100%.
Okay.
I will note really quickly, and it's evident on the screen. So this view right here shows the max luminance and minimum luminance and the contrast ratio.
Okay.
JVC has done some magic with their new 800 series and 900 series projectors. The best sample of an NZ8 that I ever did was about 34,000 to 1 native contrast ratio.
34,000?
Yeah, native contrast is that maximum white point and the maximum black point. And it's divided one by the other to get you that contrast ratio. So you divide your max luminance by your minimum luminance, and that gives you that ratio.
Okay. See, I'm learning still. Now that makes sense. I never knew, I understood the concept, but I didn't mathematically. Now that makes sense.
Yep. Man. Little things.
Yeah.
So out of the box, without going into our calibrated mode, which actually enhances contrast and enhances brightness, was 39,201.2 to 1.
Okay.
So better than any of the NZ8s that I had done, and better than most of the NZ9s that I had done as well.
Really? Even the NZ9?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, so big improvement on the 800 series. And this isn't just this projector. I've seen this across the board so far on the 800s and 900s that I've calibrated, where we're getting much better contrast readings from this generation of product than we had on the prior ones. So now that we're done kind of talking about the beginning point for the calibration, I'm going to switch to a different view, which is going to have, here we go. This is the,
green.
We got a lot of green here. And we've still got a little bit of orange and a little bit of red. And that's expected with not using the filter.
Okay.
And what I mean by the filter, what that means to you folks at home, you can see at the top here next to this green dot, there's a space where there's no dots that are present. Without the filter engaged on the projector, this is the max that the color gamut can expand. So we're not reaching full DCI-P3.
Okay.
I want to say it's around 87% of the DCI-P3 color spectrum without the filter that you're getting. And same thing down here with the red we're missing. So we're naturally going to have, because we can't hit points that are supposed to be on this edge, there's going to be some higher errors along the perimeters. Okay. Same down here.
Makes sense.
What the good news is we've got an average error that's 1.2682. So that's
imperceptible, pretty close.
Mostly imperceptible, except for those color edges because we just can't get there.
Sure.
Gamma is at a 2.41, very close to the 2.4 target that we were tracking. And we can look at this and see part of the powers of the software, and what you learn as a calibrator is why certain things are happening. So the software gives us a volumetric or three-dimensional view of the color and the color gamut. And what you'll see is those gamut edges, we're not able to, and I'm actually going to turn a feature on here so you can see, these lines or little whiskers are what the expected point is supposed to be for the standard. And the dot, which you can zoom in on, is what was actually recorded.
Okay.
And you can see on the left-hand side, which is your green to cyan, or excuse me, blue to cyan to green perimeter, we just don't have the gamut to extend over.
Right.
On the blue to magenta to red side, or the right side of this graph here, we have a luminance error, or basically we're not able to create that point with enough luminance to track accurately. And that goes only on the perimeter of that gamut, from basically the base point up to close to the maximum luminance levels.
Okay.
Or the maximum white point, because these points, this is white, this is yellow, this is green, this is cyan, this is red, and then blue, if I can back out, is down here in this corner here. So it's kind of a unique thing to look at if you haven't looked at one before, but that's what it's allowing us to see is there's a luminance error. The projector can't produce the color at the proper luminance level and gamut, so it can't move over far enough.
Okay.
So much improved results. We're tracking to the standard. We're tracking to roughly 2.4 gamma, which for a light-controlled room is the target that we're going to want to have. If you've got a quasi-light-controlled room, I'd recommend probably around a 2.3, 2.35 gamma, or if you're in a bright living room, more so with a TV than you would for a projector system. You're going to be around a 2.2 gamma. So that's the targets and what we're looking for.
So Daniel, one of the concerns that I had kind of coming into this, and I expressed that with you, is I've always heard that a lot of times when you calibrate a projector or a TV, that you actually lose brightness. And to me, that's a big deal. I want to make sure that my image is bright. I definitely don't want to lose 30% of my brightness. I mean, that's significant to me. I'm glad that we didn't have that happen. Could you dive into that a little bit and maybe share why that didn't happen in this setup, and is that something that is maybe even a misconception, or when does that occur?
Yeah, certainly. So it is something that does happen with calibration in most cases. And I mention most cases because JVC is a little bit of a unique beast in the way that they give us access as calibrators to a mode inside the projector which turns off all the internal calibration tables. Now, to do that, you have to have a device like a Lumagen or a madVR to be able to create and do 1D and 3D LUTs, because we're basically recreating those tables, but for your environment and your specific situation. So given that we're capable of doing that, we started with, we set 106 nits on the natural profile. Our calibrated profile, as you can see, landed at 103 nits. So we only lost 3 nits of brightness, which is really an imperceptible difference. You're not going to notice it. Even if they were side by side, you're not going to see that change. The major benefit. So what happened that a lot of people don't understand is you're actually gaining a significant amount of contrast, contrast ratio. So our contrast ratio jumped from that 39,000 and some change to just under 60,000 to 1.
Wow, so that almost doubled.
Yeah, it's about
Approaching
50% or higher improvement from where we were before. And that's your native contrast. So that's important, and that's going to be, you know, a lot of people on past projectors had to use laser dimming in order to reduce that black floor to a threshold where when it went to a black scene, it wasn't really gray. It would mute everything. It cheats it a little bit, but it does it in a great way. So this will give you, you won't need to do that as much. Now, people certainly still will. There's people that really enjoy that contrasty OLED type image. And that is to be sought after, and that's kind of what the manufacturers are trying to achieve. But using the JVC in this mode in combination with the video processor allowed us to retain basically the same maximum brightness with a lower or reduced black floor, which netted a positive result on our contrast ratio.
Cool. So the results that the results that you took and the measurements that you took, you can then take that data, feed that into, you can feed it directly into the JVC, correct? But a better option would be to feed it into a processor, a Lumagen or a madVR, because then we have a lot more flexibility. I noticed there were some things that you did that allowed me to be able to toggle on and off between maybe having a LUT, look-up table.
Look-up table.
See, I'll tell you, man, I'm learning, dude. Don't exactly know what that means, but anyway, I know the term. But it allows us to toggle on and off and to see, I guess, create different profiles. One profile with this filter on, one without the filter. So I visually can see, do I like it with the filter? Did it suck away a lot of the brightness? Is that perceivable? So maybe would it be cool to show you guys just some of those before and afters?
Certainly. Yeah, it's so that for the purpose of this as well, and for you as viewers to see what the expectation is, and kind of also the power of a video processor. One thing that was really apparent when we were doing that test, and we'll point out again, was even though our maximum luminance was 33 nits less, or roughly 30%,
Right.
using the filter, the midtones or the colors and brightness that you see in most scenes didn't change drastically at all. What changed was your threshold for your highlight detail, or your
like
explosions,
clouds,
clouds,
fire maybe?
fire, explosions, anything that's really bright, that a flash of lightning,
Okay.
Something like that. That maximum luminance is going to reduce, but your midtones or your scenes with faces,
Those are consistent.
they're very consistent. And that's really the benefit of powerful external video processors doing the dynamic tone mapping, is it's able to look at that metadata and see where it needs to increase and where it needs to decrease to map within your display's capabilities.
Yeah. That's a whole lot of math taking place as you're watching the movie. That's what blows my mind. All this data, the LUTs and this and that, it's taking that processing, and that apparently is why madVR needs that big, powerful processor, because there's a lot of data being crunched, and it has to be able to present that in a way that's accurate on screen.
Absolutely, that's correct. Yeah, it's actually reading ahead. I think it's 5 frames that it's looking ahead at the material so that it can present everything accurately in real time on the screen. So one subtle downside, which is easily remediated, and we did it in a quick second, was to just change the audio delay for the video processor. A madVR, you're looking at about 238 milliseconds, I think was the value that we settled on. Other video processors like a Lumagen, you're looking around 48 to 49 milliseconds. Just the way that they operate is slightly different.
So you might have to adjust the lip sync on it.
Yep, lip sync functionality, every AVR will have it. A lot of sources have it as well that you can adjust, so there's multiple different ways. And a lot of AVRs will actually have a auto lip sync functionality, which can get much closer without having to make that adjustment manually yourself.
All right, Daniel, what are we looking at here?
So this is, right now we're using the Envy's 2.1B bypass mode, so we can send an uncorrected signal from the Blu-ray player to the JVC and let it do its standard tone mapping.
Okay, so this is the JVC handling everything.
Yep, and that's also why you'll see there's bars above and below the projector.
Correct.
This is a 16:9 signal, and the Envy's not doing any processing for the auto aspect. So right now you're going to see the gentleman's face is quite a bit more red and oversaturated. Also in the hat that he's wearing, you'll see the pinks or the reds take on a pinkish tone.
Sure.
And we've actually got a little bit of what looks to be clipping of the red channel here on this side here, where you can see it kind of blotch out. So that's very noticeable content. When we switch over here, we're going to be in the JVC's calibrated mode, going through the madVR with no filter engaged.
Okay.
So we'll see in just 1 second when I hit the right button. All right, so here we are in the calibrated mode of the JVC. You can see that there's much more detail and not near as much washed out content in the what looked very vibrantly pink on his beanie before.
Kind of oversaturated before.
Very much so, yes. And then also muted reds, which were very apparent. Made him look like he'd been out in the sun for about 20 hours too much before. But here it looks much more natural, like what you would expect somebody to look like from this part of the world, where you're going to have more of a brownish skin tone versus a bright red. It looks like this may not be clipping as we expected before, because we're still seeing it here. It's still apparent in the exact same location.
Okay.
So just an artifact of the video that we caught coincidentally. But a good shot to kind of explain and show the amount of detail that you get in those areas where there's high saturations in color,
Sure.
as well as the natural color accuracy, and things mimicking how they would look in real life with your own eyes.
Yeah, and like I said before, it wasn't as obvious. Apparently, it wasn't obvious because I'm watching it going, man, this is a great looking image. And then you switch to this and you're like, oh, wow, that's what a skin tone is supposed to look like. It's brown, not red.
Yep, 100%. And we'll swap to a couple other scenes within the same demo file so you can see these files are designed to show massive saturations as well. So it's going to show all the issues with the factory calibration and what where that's going to be improved by having your display calibrated.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here we have another scene that I noticed as we were playing through this 4K HDR clip from, or movie from JVC. So what are we seeing different here in this?
Yeah, so and this is something very characteristic of a lot of the displays, whether it be a TV or projector out of the box. They oversaturate your color channels, and what that leads to is grass looking like, you know, it's grown in Chernobyl next to a nuclear power plant.
Right.
It's more vibrant than anything you've ever seen in real life, and immediately your eyes go to it, and yes, it pops off the screen, but your eyes go to it because it's not realistic looking. So you can see it's very oversaturated, very green, almost a neon green color. And here we'll swap back over to the calibrated state. And you'll see immediately that the color looks, again, more natural. It's got that dark, lush green color like you would expect of a tree or a grass field. It's not popping off the page, so to speak, and just coming screaming at you with its color. There's also going to be a little bit more detail that you're seeing in the cloud areas up here. Just defined areas of the picture where you've got overlapping colors. Because the gamma is set up proper in the projector now, you're going to be able to see more detail within those gradations from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4% stimulus or brightness all the way up to 100. So those are all evenly spaced as part of the calibration, which is going to give you that better shadow detail without crushing blacks.
Now with that higher contrast that we were getting after calibration, does that impact that as well?
It will. That takes it into account as well. So that's going to be your minimum point, or your zero stimulus is going to be that lower value. So we have to plan for that lower value by moving all the other, 1 to 100 within the proper spacing so that there's no jumps from one to another, which can cause things like posterization, where you see like not really a banding, but you can see ringing around the colors right at that variation point. It's very obvious when it happens.
So again, here's another spot that I saw in the video when we started comparing, was especially in the area of his face. It was honestly, it's more saturated in my camera than it is on the screen of what my eyes are seeing, but it's still really bright red and very saturated. But also in his fur, the fur was quite, almost like really a bright orange. And so this is with the JVC doing the tone mapping, correct?
That's correct.
All right, so then we'll go ahead and switch over to the madVR. And so here we can see that tone is a lot more natural looking. Again, it doesn't pop like you said, but the difference is this is what it looks like in real life. It doesn't look glow in the dark.
Yep, and you can see more of a brown nature to the fur versus the orange that was popping through before, almost looking like an orangutan or something, but much more natural here.
All right, so now instead of a still image, we're just going to hit play on this. And so here you can see the grass is really, really vibrant, really saturated. And one thing I didn't realize, I always loved this image right here. But one thing that occurred after calibration, look up at the clouds. These are storm clouds. These are dark clouds. But yet somehow this whole set is like lit up. Like there is some, not spotlights, but there's basically lighting on the quote scene. And that's not the case. So if we switch back over to the the calibrated version, we'll see this is what our eyes would really see on a gloomy day. It's going to be darker. It's going to be muted. And that, I think, is going to be, it's going to take me a little bit to get used to, because my eye is used to seeing, and same thing here. So we've got these donkeys walking through this grass, and it's a gloomy kind of, I mean, it's not like a super crazy bright day. It's very overcast. So I would expect the grass to have that same tone going through. Well, Daniel, this surely has been insightful to me. I've learned a lot, and of course I've got a lot to learn, but that's one thing I like to do in this channel is I like to bring my audience along my journey, because it's never too late to learn something new. Even if you're a seasoned calibrator, there's always new tools, there's new ways of doing things. So as we kind of wrap up and land this plane, number one, you've been doing this for a long time, Daniel. You've been doing this probably over 15 years.
Yep, about 15 to 20 years is when I first started doing calibrations as a hobbyist, working at Best Buy through college, and just getting a love and passion for the hobby, and working with the Geek Squad that did the ISF calibrations back then, and really over time learning that not necessarily the best way to calibrate how they were doing things, but learning the proper methodologies, especially with emissive displays like a projector. It takes a little bit different technique than you would for a traditional TV or a monitor for a computer. All equally important to calibrate. Something we haven't really touched on yet is kind of the different display technologies and how that's still important regardless of the technology. I would say it's more important with a projector just because there's so many variables. Your room, your screen, your throw distance, how big the screen is. So a lot of different things that can play into the accuracy, the brightness, the gamma for your particular display. So I'd say if it's more important on that than it would be on a traditional display like a television. Out of the box, you're still going to see that 3.5 to 4.5 delta E on a television in most cases.
So there's definitely some room for improvement, even on a TV.
Absolutely, yeah. And then you have the new things with TVs with Dolby Vision and HDR10 Plus, and HDR10, which usually in most cases go off of a strong SDR performance and calibration. So it's equally important in my opinion. Again, projectors, you're probably going to notice just more of that difference because of all the different factors that go into it. But when you think about the entire workflow of creating a movie and what they do, the cameras are calibrated, the mastering monitors are calibrated multiple times a year, and then they use traditional displays to see what it would look like in a consumer's environment, and those displays are calibrated. So everything within that chain are following the same standard. So if you're looking to get the director's intent and the most accurate natural image you can out of your device, calibration is the way to go about that.
Now, Daniel, you travel all over the US and you calibrate some really high-end systems. You calibrate everyday guys, systems like mine. So if somebody wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to have a conversation about possibly getting their setup calibrated?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do have a website, www.ref-av, which we can link in the video for you, which would be most appreciated. Also, my email address is daniel@ref-av, ref for reference AV. Because that's what we're trying to achieve is hitting all the references and the standards that have been curated over the years and what are mass used by the developers and producers. So,
well, guys, I hope y'all have seen through this video, and we spent literally the whole day just hanging out, having fun, dialing in my system, grabbing lunch. But bro, you are a wealth of knowledge. You know your stuff. You are truly a professional. So if you guys are looking at having your system professionally calibrated, I'll definitely leave Daniel's information down in the description. Super chill guy. We've had a blast, man, just hanging out, just talking life and family and hobby and obsessed home theater, this new venture that I'm on, and then of course calibrating.
Exciting times.
Yeah, man. So things are cool, but this display, I'm loving it. And I'll keep in touch because I wanna play with some of the profiles that you've created to turn on and off the filter in the JVC. That allows us to get more color accurate, but we lose a little bit of light. But we noticed, I don't think we mentioned in the video, it was very like small.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
it really wasn't that big of a deal.
The midtones are what the predominant, the overwhelming portion of a scene that you see.
We did say that.
Yeah, aren't as bright, or excuse me, they're very close to the same brightness, but your highlight brightness drops down.
Yeah. Well, Daniel, it's been awesome, man.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you coming by.
Thank you.
Guys, I hope this video has been helpful to you. Just learning about calibration. There's so much to it, but the great thing, there's so many great guys that you can get in contact with that can walk you step by step through it, dial in your system, and help you get the best performance out of the gear that you've paid good money for. So hope you guys have an incredible week. God bless, and we'll catch you in the next video. And that's it, my man.
Perfect.
Bam! Now I just got all night to edit it.